Welcome to the More Than English podcast, where we discuss fascinating and influential ideas, learning English along the way. Here we learn more than English. I'm your host Stephen. Today, and for the first few episodes of this podcast, we're going to jump in at the deep end to discuss an imperative question. Do you hear a noise like a bell? Well, actually, that noise is to notify you that I'm using some advanced vocabulary, or maybe it's a new concept that you haven't heard before. So if you're watching this video, you can see here the definitions of these concepts and new words. If you're listening, don't worry, because at the end of the episode, I'm going to personally give you the definitions of the words we use during this episode and every episode. So what is this imperative question that I'm talking about? Well, it's what is your worldview? Worldview is another way of saying how do you think the world works? Or more specifically, what is the fundamental relationship between two agents? Sounds a bit complicated, right? Well, here an agent, and in international relations and so on, an agent is any entity or thing that has a specific role or interest in a relationship. So this relationship could mean an individual relationship, like the relationship between myself and my parents, for example, or this could be the relationship between, for example, two nations. For example, when China and Nigeria try to do a trade deal, they usually have a representative or an agent that talks to the leaders or perhaps some ministers or administrators of the other country to make the deal. In this case, they're an agent of their country. Maybe you've heard of James Bond before, 007. Well, he's a secret agent. This means that he is representing MI6, the secret service of the UK government, but it's a covert operation, meaning that he is in fact an agent of the country, but he's a spy, so it's secret. He doesn't want anyone to know this, right? So why do I think this question is so imperative, so fundamental? As well as being incredibly interesting, I think they're imperative because they can literally change the way we see the world and act in it. This first episode of the podcast, and indeed this first series, was actually inspired by a recent Lex Fridman podcast with John Mearsheimer. John Mearsheimer is a realist scholar that I read a lot about during my master's degree in international relations a few years ago. If you're interested in listening to that conversation, you can click the link here. In fact, podcasts like Lex Fridman's and Jordan Peterson, Andrew Huberman, maybe you've heard some of these names, are some of the inspirations for creating this podcast, because I believe their podcasts are so enlightening and productive, inspirational, but unfortunately because they speak quite fluently and fast, it could be difficult to understand for some non-native speakers. Hopefully in this podcast we can still talk about such interesting topics as they do, but using English that is a bit more easy to understand perhaps, speaking a little bit more clearly, and when I use advanced vocabulary, you will hear the bell. Maybe you've heard words like liberal, socialist, maybe even fascist, communist, nihilist, and so on. Lots of ists and isms. But do you truly know the components of each of these concepts? If you call yourself a liberal or maybe somebody else a socialist, for example, are you saying these words because you've heard them and read them maybe in news articles, or have you took a deep dive to really understand what these ideologies mean, at least what they meant when they were created? First episode of this podcast, we're going to focus on one worldview, realism. Perhaps you've heard the word realist before. A realist, generally speaking, is somebody who thinks the most likely answer is the one that makes the most sense based on the objective truths or the facts that we have in front of us, such as numerical data, some numbers, something which we can say that's a fact And based on that fact, we're going to make a decision. Okay, so we could say that's a realist in a more general term. In this way, the opposite of a realist, perhaps we could say, is an idealist. I'm going to give a football or soccer example. I'm from the UK, so if I say football, it's soccer, okay? But let me give a football example. So if two brothers, let's say, are watching their favorite team and they're losing 3-0, 3-0, maybe one of the brothers is a realist. So he says, well, it's 3-0, there's only 30 minutes left of the game perhaps, and it doesn't look like we're going to come back. I think we don't have a chance of even drawing this game, never mind winning. Let's just turn off the TV, or at least I'm not going to keep watching the game, so hopefully, maybe I'll keep watching because I'm a good fan, and I should keep supporting my team. But a realist wouldn't be so hopeful that 3-0 down, losing the game, being dominated by the other team, that they have a chance of winning still. But the idealist, maybe the brother perhaps, even though they're losing 3-0, even though watching the game in this moment, the other team is still dominating, an idealist maybe would think, yeah, it looks bad now, we're probably not going to win, but I'm an idealist, so I think there's always a chance. And maybe the idealist brother might make a bet with the realist brother. For example, might say, yeah, I know they're probably going to lose, but if they win, you have to wash my clothes maybe for the next year. Okay, but if they lose, I wash your clothes just for 1 week. The realist might think this is a good bet, like, oh, of course I'm not going to lose, so I'm willing to make the bet that if I lose, I have to, the realist, right? If the realist loses, he has to wash his brother's clothes for a year. But he thinks, well, it's fine because it's almost no chance that's going to happen, realistically, right? But the idealist thinks, yeah, maybe I'll have to wash my brother's clothes for a week, but I'm an idealist, so I think there's a small chance they're going to win, and then my brother can wash my clothes for the whole year. So that's maybe an example to think about. What's a realist versus an idealist perspective, generally speaking? So would you say you're more of a realist or an idealist? Or maybe you would like a third option, or a fourth? Well, for some realist scholars, the opposite of realist would not be idealist, but instead a liberal. You've probably heard this word before, and we're going to talk more about it in a couple of episodes. Nevertheless, please let me know in the comments what you think. You'll never guess what happened. 2 days after I recorded the last part, the clip giving the example of the football game with the idealist and the realist, it really happened. You won't believe it. So 2 days after, I'm watching my team, Manchester United, and we're playing Aston Villa. Aston Villa aren't such a good team usually, but this season they're doing great. And I was worried we're going to lose, actually. So I wasn't so hopeful or idealistic at the start of the game. After 30 minutes, we're 2-0 down. I start to lose hope completely. I wait until half-time, it's still 2-0, and yep, like I said in the example, it didn't look like we were going to win. We were being dominated, and in fact, this year we haven't scored 3 goals in a game very often, so 2-0 down, I thought it was over. I have to be honest, and quite embarrassingly, I turned off the game at half-time. I couldn't deal with any more. It was 2-0, I was out of confidence. I decided to watch a stand-up comedy instead. I watched the stand-up comedy, I go to bed, and the next day I look at the news, 3-2. Man United, my team, had crawled back to win the game 3-2 after being 2-0 down at half-time. Wow, I can't believe it. Maybe it pays to be an idealist sometimes. Well, actually, in international relations theory, there are many types of realism. But today, and for the next few episodes, we're going to focus on the bare bones of the matter. And in this case, the two most prominent examples or theories of realism, which are classical realism and structural realism. So, before talking about the differences between these two types, let's talk about what these two most prominent types of realism have in common. Or, another way of saying, what do all realists agree on? Well, in realism, there are two main axioms. The first one is that the fundamental motivation or drive for all agents, remember, agent could be an individual, a nation, an organization, and so on. So one more time. The fundamental motivation or drive for all agents is to survive. In fact, for realists, the best way to survive, and given that they want to survive, that's what they're concerned about more than ever, the best thing they think is to do this is to increase their power, or to at least maintain it. The worst thing that you can do, according to a realist, is to lose your power. Okay? Another axiom of realism is that all agents, for example, perhaps a nation, or for some realists, individuals, are rational actors. The world has rational agents, we could say. If you are rational, it means you have a reason why you made a decision. This doesn't have to mean that the decision was objectively the best decision, but rather that you made a decision based on your own reasoning. So let me give you an example. This has happened to me a few times in my life, and I'm sure it's happened to many of you. It's Friday evening, you've had a long week at work, and you decide to wind down and put on a movie. And what could be better than relaxing watching a movie? Eating some ice cream, of course. So you help yourself to 1 or 2 scoops of ice cream and wolf it down. But after 10 minutes you decide, I think I want some more ice cream. I've got a sweet tooth. So you help yourself to another scoop, maybe 2. Maybe you finish the whole tub. And when you're deciding to have another scoop, like me, you probably give a reason why you deserve it or why it's okay. Maybe, I've had a long week at work, I deserve another scoop of ice cream. Or maybe you say to yourself, it's okay because in the morning I'm going to go to the gym and burn the calories off. You rationalize this decision. But after 1 or 2 hours, especially if you eat the whole tub, you probably feel quite terrible. So a realist would say that although there is rationality to your decision, this doesn't always mean that it's the right decision, right? Eating the whole tub of ice cream objectively is probably a bad idea. You're probably not going to feel very good after doing it. But in that moment when you decide to get another scoop, you rationalize it in your head. So for realists, all agents, that could be individuals like in my case, or nations when they make a deal with another country, are doing it based on some reasoning. They have rationalized it in their head. And therefore, and for realists, all agents are rational. So realists believe that all nations and perhaps all individuals want to survive above all else, and that's why they make the decisions they do. And the best way to do this, they believe, is to increase their power. Well, what is power exactly? Of course, this is a common word. It can be used to describe many things. Actually, in international relations or in politics in general, psychology, power can be used to describe the influence you have over your environment. And for realists, the best power you can have is what they call hard power. So what is hard power? Well, in international relations, hard power usually relates to things which are material or tangible and undeniable. So you cannot argue about whether it's true or not. It's definitely true, you cannot argue, and it's tangible, it's material, you can touch it, that proves that it's undeniable. So what is the most undeniable and material things that we can say make you powerful? Well, for realists like Mearsheimer, the 2 most important things, at least for a nation, are population size and money. Basically, the more people you have and the more money you have as a nation, the more powerful you are. The point is actually what they do with these two things. And usually, especially for countries like the USA and Russia, they use these resources to make a strong army. And an army is an undeniable source of power. If you have an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers with the best weapon systems and so on, we cannot argue that they are powerful. On an individual level, let's talk about Elon Musk. So right now, Elon Musk is the most wealthy person on Earth officially, and is probably going to be for the foreseeable future. So of course we can say he's a powerful individual because he has so much money, right? With that money he can buy whatever he wants, hire whoever he wants, and wherever he goes many people will be trying to wait on him, maybe trying to get some of his money. So of course he has influence over his environment in this case because he can buy whatever he wants and everybody is looking to maybe get something from him. But power is not that simple, right? As we said, just having a lot of money doesn't guarantee you'll be the most powerful person in the world, right? For example, Elon Musk is a civilian, so unlike perhaps Putin or Xi Jinping or Biden, he doesn't have access to a big army. So in the hard power sense, in the national power, Elon Musk doesn't have as much power as Putin because although he has a lot of money, he cannot mobilize an army. Okay? But Elon Musk has power in other ways, and he's very powerful despite the fact he's not a world leader. For example, with his billions of dollars, he recently decided to acquire Twitter, now X. And quite shockingly, and he said this himself, he did this in part for ideological reasons. Well, talking about ideological reasons, what's that got to do with power? Well, actually, that's more of a topic for soft power. We haven't talked about soft power yet, but we're going to talk about that in the next episode. Nevertheless, talking about hard power, and despite money, we can say that Elon Musk is very powerful because he has a big sphere of influence. Remember we talked about nations, and for nations, population size and money or wealth are so important. Well, obviously for individuals, we cannot say population, right? But Musk is a businessman, he has many businesses and employs thousands of people. Not only that, but he has businesses in a wide range of areas, of sectors. We could say that he has his fingers in many pies. And for this reason, his sphere of influence is enormous. Because not only does he deal with, for example, people in the automotive industry, but also the energy industry, the rocket making industry, and because many of his work, such as Neuralink as well, we have to mention, many of his works, his businesses are at the cutting edge. He has to talk and communicate, have relations with people in all kinds of areas such as legal and administration and different governments. So Elon Musk is not only powerful because he has lots of money, many people are millionaires or billionaires but don't have the sphere of influence that Musk does because he works in a variety of sectors and has to converse and relate to many people in many areas all over the world. That's all for this first episode. To be honest, I wanted to do just one episode on realism, but actually we've only just started to scratch the surface, and so the next episode will also focus on realism, but more specifically, the differences between classical and structural realism. There will also be a real-life example, a thought experiment that you can do, and hopefully, doing this experiment, you will know whether you're more of a classical realist, structural realist, or neither. I also have decided to split this up into two parts because I want to make the episodes as short and snappy as possible, just maybe 15 to 20 minutes. In this way, there will be around 10 to 15 new words and expressions you can learn every lesson. I don't want to give you 40 new words just for one episode, that would be too much, right? So, hopefully see you for the next episode, which will be part 2 of Realism. Until then. Thank you for listening to the More Than English podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. And now here is today's key vocabulary, page 1. To jump in at the deep end. To start something new and do the difficult part first. Imperative. Very important, vital, fundamental. Agent. Anyone that has a specific role or interest in a relationship. Covert. Not publicly known, secret. The antonym is overt. To take or do a deep dive. An extensive and thorough investigation or study of a topic. To claw back. To recover or retake, with great effort, something that was lost. The bare bones. The most important facts of a subject. Prominent. Widely known, eminent. Axiom. An established rule, principle, or universally recognized truth. A maxim. Page 2. To wind down. To relax after doing something tiring. Unwind. To wolf down. To eat something very quickly. Devour. To have a sweet tooth. To have a preference or propensity for sugary foods, like ice cream. Power. The influence you have over your environment. Hard power. Things which are material and undeniable, for example, an army. To have one's fingers in many pies. To have responsibilities or commitments to many things at once. At the cutting edge. The newest, most advanced stage in the development of something. To scratch the surface. To just begin to learn about or do something. To know the basics. And finally, snappy. Quick and full of energy. Lively. Thank you for listening. See you next time.